We once sat for hours in brilliant movie palaces, gazing up at the screen and letting our hearts melt to the smiles of dashing leading men. They were the elegant gentlemen in crisp suits, dream lovers of pure beauty for whom millions of women around the world once yearned. Yet behind that perfect veneer molded by the studios, how much of it was actually the truth? Was the innocence we so worshipped merely a cruel screenplay designed to mask the nature of a predator? The darkest truths only truly stepped out of the shadows late one night in 1987 in San Antonio, as Pola Negri's breath became nothing but ragged gasps by her deathbed. Amidst an atmosphere saturated with the scent of medicine and solitude, a stack of yellowed handwritten papers was discovered. It was not a memoir of vain glories, but a spine-chilling indictment of 8 illustrious men, faces that heartlessly destroyed her life to nourish their own radiance, turning our decades of trust into a cruel joke concealed by flawless smiles. It is time to cast aside the dust of time and the artificial fragrance of crisp suits, to look directly into the essence of the men we once called idols. The darkest and most terrifying truths will begin to manifest the moment the velvet curtain falls. Are you prepared to step across the threshold of the dreamlike cinema with us, to touch the cold, hidden corners behind the brilliant lights? 1. Errol Flynn, the Ambassador Hotel scapegoat and the statutory rape defense. The first name to materialize in the deathbed testament was Errol Flynn. In 1943, the world deified him as the gallant Robin Hood. But to Pola, he was a sexual predator wearing the face of an angel. He regarded women as disposable toys, used once and discarded. Behind the swashbuckling persona, often seen at the Garden of Allah tavern, lurked a character tarnished by filthy calculations. Flynn was a seasoned predator, prowling through extravagant galas to hunt for women in distress, intending to exploit them to salvage his own crumbling reputation. Pola's spiral into the abyss began during a 1942 New Year's Eve party at Mulholland Farm, Flynn's isolated mountaintop estate in the Santa Monica Mountains. In a house riddled with two-way mirrors and hidden microphones, morality was ignored in favor of frantic jazz, the heavy stench of bootleg liquor, and suffocating opium smoke. At that time, Pola Negri was at her lowest point, her silent film career having disintegrated in the age of sound. She was a lost soul amidst the depraved crowd and quickly fell into Flynn's crosshairs. He approached her with the coldness of an executioner, whispering promises of a career-defining role in an upcoming project. In truth, he recognized her as the perfect shield to divert public outrage from his statutory rape trial involving 2 teenagers, Peggy Satterley and Betty Hansen, a revolting criminal case that threatened him with life imprisonment in a Los Angeles court in early 1943 on charges of child sexual assault. On a rainy night in January 1943, while the trial was turning heavily against him, Flynn lured Pola to a room at the Ambassador Hotel under the guise of a script discussion. Beneath the jaundiced light of a suite that reeked of luxury and falsehood, he drugged her with a glass of champagne laced with a high dose of barbiturates. The following morning, before the first rays of sun could warm Los Angeles, tens of thousands of copies of the Examiner sat on the doorsteps of every American home, bearing blackened headlines that struck directly at Pola's honor. The surreptitious photos from the Ambassador Hotel were more than just a humiliation. They were a death sentence for her career. In the oak-paneled offices of Paramount and MGM, studio moguls coldly used their pipes to strike her name from all future projects, turning million-dollar contracts into scrap paper in an instant. The Legion of Decency organized public prayers that were, in reality, ideological executions, where Pola's name was recited like a pathogen that needed to be purged from American social morality. The most bitter pill was that as the butcher, Flynn walked out of court with an arrogant smirk, acquitted thanks to that media chaos, Pola was cast into the deep pit of ostracization. She was forced to sell every diamond necklace to buy the silence of blackmailers, eventually fleeing to San Antonio to live her final years as a ghost, erased from Hollywood history in the contempt of a generation that once worshipped her. In the final testament written in San Antonio, her resentment was compressed into every stroke of the pen. Errol Flynn was a sexual criminal with the face of a leading man. He turned me into a scapegoat at the Ambassador Hotel to trade for his freedom in that 43 rape case. The most revolting truth is that he used the very blank check I had signed to invest in a film to pay for that hotel room bill and to bribe the reporters who took those humiliating photos of me. He used my own money to destroy my life. Until my final breath, the cheers hailing him as a hero still ring in my ears like a bitter insult, for every cent he stole from my hand was used to buy the very people who directly trampled my honor. 2. Charlie Chaplin, the master of fabricated insanity and the abusive recordings of Summit Drive. The world bowed at the feet of Charlie Chaplin, the little tramp with oversized shoes, a bamboo cane, and a gentle on-screen smile, the grand icon of compassion for the underdog. However, behind that image of the poor clown lay a master-slave relationship disguised as love. Behind the shimmering engagement ring was a ruthless commercial contract where Chaplin regarded Pola Negri as a mere media pawn to amplify his own fame. At the Summit Drive estate, Chaplin unmasked his true nature as a controlling tyrant with malicious tactics designed to demolish her character. Chaplin's cruelty lay in his ability to manipulate Pola Negri's life like a dark screenplay, transforming her sincere affection into a tool for his insatiable greed and solitary power. In January 1923, amidst the luxury of the Ritz-Carlton in New York, Chaplin staged a flamboyant engagement ceremony before hundreds of reporters. He knelt to present Pola with a 3-carat diamond ring, a calculated act of showmanship designed to hijack public attention for his film The Kid, which was then in theaters. Pola, who yearned for a true home in America, entered this marriage contract unaware that Chaplin had embedded slave-like clauses regarding her assets and reputation within the very papers she signed. Immediately upon Pola moving into the Summit Drive mansion, the estate transformed into a prison without bars. Chaplin established a suffocating surveillance system, forbade her from contacting old friends, and monitored her every gesture. He secretly installed dictaphone recorders behind bookshelves and beneath her bed. To gather evidence to ruin her, Chaplin constantly used vicious insults regarding her Polish heritage, forcing her into states of panic and screams of resentment. All those sounds of agony were recorded coldly for one objective: to frame her as an insane woman on legal records. The conflict reached its zenith when Chaplin decided to call off the engagement to avoid the communal property sharing required by California law. He hired a group of psychiatrists from Beverly Hills, men who drew their salaries directly from his film empire, to visit the mansion under the guise of a health check. Based on meticulously edited recordings that featured only Pola's desperate screams, these doctors signed a fraudulent medical report, concluding she suffered from paranoid hysteria. This was a dark truth never before revealed. Chaplin directly forced her to ingest high-dose sedatives to keep her in a lethargic, disoriented state when the United Artists lawyers arrived for meetings. Chaplin leveraged his power as a founding partner at United Artists to summon a closed board meeting in May 1923. He presented Pola's fake psychiatric records and asserted she was a major risk to the company's image. As a result, Pola was stripped of all major roles, and Hollywood studios turned their backs in unison, fearing the madness that the press was loudly reporting under Chaplin's direction. He personally leaked these medical files to Luella Parsons, the most powerful journalist of the era, to turn Pola into a national laughingstock. While Chaplin raked in millions from the audience's affection, Pola endured humiliating, forced psychiatric treatments at private clinics. The most cowardly truth was that Chaplin hired someone to steal Pola's entire jewelry collection, valued at $200,000, from Summit Drive, then reported to the police that she had personally thrown them into the sea during a manic episode. In her final, resentment-filled letter, she wrote, "Charlie Chaplin was the cruelest man I ever met. He staged the engagement at the Ritz-Carlton only for PR, then used dictaphones at Summit Drive to trap me in a fake mental health record. He forced me to take poison so I would remain silent while he proclaimed I was mad. The clown the whole world worshipped laughed at my real tears. He craved the sensation of trampling a woman until I had to beg for death." Every burst of laughter from the audience for that compassionate tramp was the most cruel sentence delivered directly to the humiliating truth he had used poison and recorders to bury my life. For decades, the world remained enthralled by the laughter Chaplin brought, but the naked reality behind those films was a woman's very real pain. Was the truth in this letter the way this comedy empire used Pola's actual tears to trade for eternal adoration, while using a folder of fake medical records to erase the humanity of the star with the mournful face? 3. Emil Jannings, the butcher of UFA, character assassination by spotlight and the cruelty of the Gestapo. Berlin in 1919 reappeared as vividly as if it were only yesterday through the searing memories of sharp jackboots that reverberated against the cold stone floors of the UFA studio in Babelsberg. In an atmosphere thick with the stench of film-developing chemicals and the icy chill radiating from massive metal equipment, Emil Jannings established a system of absolute control rooted in fear. He possessed humanity's very first Academy Award, but in reality, he was a pathologically envious man, a predator who was ready to trample over the blood and beauty of his colleagues to maintain his solitary dominance at the studio. To Jannings, Pola Negri, a Polish immigrant woman, was merely a second-class creature, someone who was never permitted to stand on equal footing with a man who constantly boasted about his so-called pure Aryan blood. Every written word recalled a plot to destroy a woman's beauty, the coldest in UFA's history, on the set of Madame du Barry. Jannings directly bribed the lighting technicians, forcing them to remove the protective filters from the high-powered carbon arc spotlights right before the scene where Pola had to kneel at the foot of the throne. That was no accident. It was a blade that had been sharpened long in advance. As the cameras began to roll, Jannings coldly adjusted the direction of the light, focusing it straight onto her corneas and facial skin from a distance of less than 2 meters. While Pola struggled to complete the scene, the intense heat and ultraviolet rays began to burn her skin cells alive. The star actually smelled her own burning flesh and heard the horrific sizzling sound right beneath the camera lens. Instead of calling for a stop, Jannings stood behind that lethal glare, wore a satisfied smirk, and forced her to remain in that position so as not to ruin the grand shot. The result was second-degree burns across her entire face, and her eyes were so swollen that she could not open them for 3 weeks, leaving behind permanent, deep psychological scars. Jannings later broadcasted throughout Hollywood that she was clumsy Polish trash, a jinx who was unworthy of sharing a frame with an Aryan genius. Jannings' cruelty reached its peak of revulsion when the actor shook hands with Joseph Goebbels' propaganda machine. Under the title of State Artist, Jannings turned every audition at UFA into a political battlefield where he personally purged foreign artists. The most terrifying secret occurred when Jannings surreptitiously stole the private diaries of the mournful-faced star, then personally handed them over to the Gestapo as an indictment to prove she was a Polish spy. He did not just want to take her place on the screen. He craved to see her completely annihilated by the hands of the SS, the notorious protection squadrons, in black uniforms who specialized in executions and liquidations without trial in the name of the empire's purity. On a freezing winter night in 1935, amidst a blizzard that besieged Berlin, Jannings directly commanded a Gestapo unit to surround her Eichengrund villa. He stood in the shadows, coldly watching as the agents smashed priceless statues, tore up labor contracts, and confiscated all of Pola's bank accounts. While she was forced to flee through the night into France with only the clothes on her back, Jannings committed one final act of malice. He ordered the destruction of every original master negative of her most successful films made in Germany. He used those burning film reels as fuel to warm his morbid ego, completely erasing the name Pola Negri from the nation's cinematic history, so that no beauty would ever again outshine this Aryan tyrant. The true secret hidden within the deathbed testament Pola left behind was a heart-wrenching accusation of this brutal reality. Emil Jannings was a demon wearing the robes of a great man. He scorched my eyes with carbon lamps at UFA just to seize a solitary glory, and then used the muzzles of the Gestapo to strip away my second home. He looted my villa and used my own burning films as fuel to warm his sick ego. Emil Jannings did not just kill a colleague's honor. He assassinated my entire brilliant future with the most cowardly political betrayal. The world still respected Emil Jannings as a monument of art, but how many dared to admit that each of his international awards was built upon the ashes of the life of the woman he hunted? Could the real secret behind the collapse of German cinema in 1935 have been the way this state artist shook hands with death to bury his co-star's existence in the darkness? 4. John Gilbert, the alcoholic who dragged his lover into a pit of debt, and the final gunshot at the Garden of Allah. The yellowed pages of the final testament left by the actress Pola before her death resurrect a reality stained with the desperate hues of John Gilbert. In the 1920s, Gilbert was the god of love on the silver screen, a man whose mere wink could skip the heartbeats of an entire nation. But behind the doors of Villa 18 at the Garden of Allah in 1930, that aura was drowned in the sour stench of cheap gin and thick smoke clinging to tarnished velvet curtains. The man who once dominated the media was now a ghost with eyes reddened and blurred by sleeping pills, sitting in the dark counting Pola Negri's gasping breaths. Gilbert refused to wither alone. With fingers trembling from withdrawal, he used his remaining strength to drag her into the same abyss of despair. The sugary words that once melted every barrier were now foul, alcohol-laden whispers hissed into her ear, while his other hand secretly stirred veronal into her champagne. He transformed Pola into a mannequin of flesh, cold, helpless, and paralyzed under a flickering light so he could execute his most base schemes. The stinging truth manifested in every bubbling glass of champagne Gilbert hand-delivered to Pola each morning. Beneath the shimmering effervescence lay the bitter aftertaste of veronal and phenobarbital, high-dose sedatives he had been covertly blending. Gilbert watched coldly as the woman who loved him drifted into oblivion, her tongue swollen and cold sweat pouring out in a forced coma, while Pola lay motionless like a soulless corpse on bedsheets reeking of stale liquor. Gilbert sat beside her, meticulously using her pen to practice every curve of the letter P and every stroke of the N. He turned her unconscious hand into a tool to sign a series of blood debts from Chicago's organized crime syndicates. $100,000, her entire life savings and film royalties, were incinerated in his gambling bouts and wretched binges, turning Pola into a penniless debtor while she was still trapped in the fog of his poison. The most revolting secret lay with the strange guests Gilbert brought to the villa while Pola was comatose. To secure money for his drink, he allowed mob creditors into the bedroom to admire the unconscious body of the legendary star as if she were a display commodity. This depraved violation occurred right under Pola's nose while she was imprisoned in a drug-induced lethargy. He didn't just steal her money. He sold her dignity for a few bottles of hard liquor and low-stakes poker hands. Gilbert intentionally maintained a sedative dosage high enough to cause permanent memory impairment, ensuring she could never stand as a witness in court against his forged contracts. All hope shattered on the night of January 9, 1936, when rain lashed against the windows of the Garden of Allah like cold leather whips. After a bitter sleep heavy with barbiturates, Pola awoke in the dim glow of an oil lamp, her stomach churning from the toxins. Before her, on a table covered in cigarette ash and liquor stains, were the stark white debt papers bearing her own signature, written by the trembling, treacherous hand of her lover. The brutal truth emerged. While she lay like a corpse, Gilbert had meticulously turned her into a financial shield for his blood debts. As she tried to flee, Gilbert locked the living room door, forcing her to witness his final performance. The gunshot tore through the quiet night of Sunset Boulevard. Gilbert did not pull the trigger out of love or remorse. He fired in the most sadistic manner possible, aiming directly at his head so that his blood and marrow would splatter across Pola's most precious original scripts and diaries. Even in death, he wanted his image to be a raw, red scar over her every bright memory. While Gilbert's body still reeked of gunpowder, debt collectors from the Chicago mob kicked down the door of Villa 18. They didn't wait for the police. They brutally ripped the diamond necklaces, still warm, from Pola's neck and looted her luxury furs before her dazed eyes to settle the blood-stained debts. Pola was cast onto the sidewalk of Sunset Boulevard in the freezing rain, her bare feet bleeding from stepping on the glass shards from her lover's suicide. This humiliating truth led her to cheap, traveling circuses on the Texas border. There, the woman who was once the icon of elegance slept with livestock in the stench of animal waste, applying makeup under flickering oil lamps to step onto a stage and be a laughingstock for crude crowds. She picked up the spare change thrown at her face just to pay for the cowardly betrayal Gilbert had stamped onto her life with a bullet. John Gilbert poured death into my glass every day. He took my hand and led me into the abyss because he did not want to die alone. The shot at the Garden of Allah was not the shot that ended his life, but the shot that murdered my entire future and honor. He deliberately turned his death into a poisoned blade, using his final gasps and that splattered pool of blood to seal a permanent curse, condemning me to a life of utter destitution and bone-deep shame, forcing me to live like a wandering shadow to pay for the cowardice he called love. 5. Clive Brook. The Lavender Gentleman and the Plan to Eradicate the Polish Foreign Entity. Every step Clive Brook took on the Hollywood red carpets of the 1930s radiated the heavy scent of lavender mixed with the icy pride of pure Anglo-Saxon blood. Dressed in a perfectly pressed tweed suit without a single wrinkle, an Earl Grey teacup always held in his stiff, slender fingers, Brook was the living embodiment of the British moral standards that the white American audience of that era fervently worshipped. Yet behind the shimmering gold-rimmed glasses and a polite smile that never reached his eyes was a razor-sharp intellect harboring a profound loathing for immigrant foreign entities. To Brook, Pola Negri, the Polish woman with the coarse accent and the mournful face, was a pathogen tainting the purity of royal cinema. He didn't need guns or fists. He eliminated her with the bone-chilling nonchalance of a man who viewed the destruction of a colleague as a necessary cleaning procedure to protect the dignity of his lineage. The dark reality erupted in the spring of 1932 on the set of Shanghai Express at Paramount Studios. Amidst the air thick with the smell of engine oil and the scorching heat from the hissing carbon arc lamps, Brook quietly orchestrated a character assassination disguised as a workplace accident. He used crisp new dollar bills, tucked between fingers adorned with diamond rings, to bribe the mechanics in the shadows of the prop warehouse. He forced them to smear a layer of industrial lubricant, transparent and thick like the slime of an alien creature, onto the wooden floor right at a turn hidden from the camera's view. While Pola focused her spirit for the action sequence, Brook sat calmly sipping his tea, his eyes as cold as a winter lake, tracking her every move like a hunter watching his prey enter a snare. He didn't even blink when he saw Pola's heel approach the death zone. His lips quirked into a faint, dry smile, a silent acknowledgement of the act he was about to execute. The stinging memories in Pola's final testament recall the dry, sickening snap that tore through the studio silence when the director shouted, "Action!" Pola lunged forward with all her remaining hope to save her career, but her heel struck the slippery grease. Her entire body weight collapsed onto the hard wooden floor with a devastating force of impact. Her hip bone wasn't merely fractured, it was crushed into sharp, jagged splinters that impaled her flesh from the inside. Every time she tried to move, the friction of the shattered bone echoed in her head like the sound of gravel being ground. Instead of stopping to provide aid, Clive Brook coldly demanded the director keep filming the scene of the leading lady writhing in agony to exploit that gruesome authenticity for the film, while blood from the wound began to soak through her expensive white silk dress. Amidst the shock of the crew, Brook slowly stood, adjusted the pocket square on his jacket, uttered a mocking remark about the clumsiness of foreign trash who don't know how to walk in the sanctuary of Hollywood, and nonchalantly turned his back, leaving her lying there in a pool of filthy machine oil. The darkest truth, unmasked in the final lines of her letter, was the medical purge that Brook arranged. Brook used his diplomatic network in London to bribe Pola's primary surgeons, forcing them to perform a deliberately flawed treatment procedure to ensure her hip injury would never truly heal. He didn't just break her body. He wanted to use his elegant white gloves to cinch a silk noose around her entire future, slamming every door leading back to Europe with forged political reports. To the Hollywood elite of the time, the shattered hip of a Polish immigrant woman was a cheap price to pay to keep the red carpet clean of stains that didn't belong to their class. 6. Wallace Reed, the morphine addict who secretly planted poison in his lover's handbag to escape charges. In the memories of American audiences of the 1920s, Wallace Reed was the embodiment of flawless perfection. A square, masculine face, a smile radiant as sunlight, and an aura full of vitality characteristic of the white upper class. He was the golden boy, molded by the studios to become the moral standard for America's youth. However, the dark reality hidden behind the glossy posters was a slave to morphine, an addict carrying the strong scent of cold sweat and hands that always trembled whenever he was away from the camera lens. The stinging truth about this actor erupted on a sordid party night in Hollywood Hills, where Reed committed an act of ultimate cowardice to save his fading glory. It was a sweltering summer night in 1922, amidst a time when Hollywood was being shaken by the Hayes Office moral cleanup campaigns following the Fatty Arbuckle scandal. The party at a glass-enclosed mansion atop Hollywood Hills was thick with the smell of bootleg liquor and opium smoke, sickly sweet to the point of nausea. Reed approached Pola Negri with his characteristic angelic smile. With fingers trembling from drug cravings, he handed her small white pills, whispering that they were magic candies that helped erase the fatigue of long days on the set. In reality, it was high-dose morphine, the poison that had long eroded his humanity. As Pola began to sink into a lethargic state, pupils dilated and incapable of rational control, Reed noticed the flashlights of the Los Angeles police force silently surrounding the mansion during the Clean Up Hollywood campaign. The truth, stained with betrayal, is clearly revealed through Pola's final reminiscent lines left by her deathbed. The moment the footsteps of the morality squad echoed outside in the hallway, Reed did not choose to protect the woman who was unconscious because of the very drug he provided. He coldly and quickly stuffed all the remaining morphine into Pola's handbag, then casually walked to another room, pretending to be a gentleman enjoying tea. When the police burst in, they only saw the Polish star collapsed amidst the incriminating evidence, while the golden boy, Wallace Reed, stood behind, delivering a performance of a lifetime regarding shock and disappointment at the depraved lifestyle of his foreign colleague. The consequence of this frame-up was a reality fierce enough to cause shudders. Pola was arrested that very night, taken to a forced rehabilitation center where she had to endure heat shock therapies and humiliating isolation in cold rooms smelling of chemicals. The Hollywood press, under the control of the studios wanting to protect Reed's million-dollar image, turned her into a pathogen that needed to be eradicated from American social morality. Her beauty faded rapidly under the side effects of high-dose sedatives and unutterable resentment. The yellowed lines in her final letter exposed the truth with stinging words. Wallace Reed is a coward. With an angelic face, on that summer night in 22, when the police burst into the Hills mansion, he coldly stuffed the morphine he was holding in his hand into my purse, then stepped back into the shadows to sip tea like an innocent gentleman. He watched me be dragged away in humiliation, thrown into rehab with painful heat shock sessions, just to protect his million-dollar smile. 7. Adolphe Menjou, the Gentleman of Chicago, and the Financial Execution on Black Thursday. In the high society circles of Hollywood in the late 1920s, Adolphe Menjou was hailed as the best-dressed man in the world. With his meticulously groomed mustache and crisp Savile Row suits, he stood as the ultimate icon of refined sophistication. Yet, the pitch-black reality lurking behind that polished exterior was a cold-blooded loan shark, a financial predator with deep-rooted ties to the Chicago underworld. The stinging truth about Menjou ignited on the fateful night of October 24, 1929, the day the American stock market collapsed, triggering the Great Depression. While thousands were leaping from the windows of Wall Street offices, Menjou materialized at the Chateau de la Pola mansion with a calm that was bone-chilling. Amidst the chaos, as Pola Negri watched her fortune evaporate with every beat of the ticker tape machine, Menjou presented her with a dossier he called a protective trust contract. He weaponized his fraudulent elegance and promises of financial salvation to lure her into signing. In the flickering light of a study thick with the scent of expensive cigars, Pola unwittingly signed away her entire film catalog and personal estate to a front company operated by the Chicago mob. Menjou watched her sign with a predatory stillness, his eyes never leaving the diamonds around her throat, while his other hand nonchalantly sipped a glass of sherry. The betrayal reached its zenith only weeks later. To incinerate any trace of the fraud, Menjou hired professional arsonists to stage a horrific fire at a law office in downtown Los Angeles, the vault where Pola's original ownership records were kept. As the flames licked clean every shred of evidence regarding the star's rights, Menjou emerged with a mask of innocence, declaring that every document had turned to ash and that she no longer possessed any legal standing regarding her own wealth. As the first frost gripped the stained glass of the Chateau de la Pola, Menjou's gentleman mask finally shattered to reveal the face of a financial executioner. Immediately after the embers of the law office fire died out, Menjou directed a squad of brutal private security guards to hurl Pola out of her own home with nothing but a single small suitcase. The woman once worshipped by all of America was forced to stand on the sidewalk of Sunset Boulevard, her bare feet bleeding against the freezing snow, watching the gentleman Menjou nonchalantly slam the carved oak door and smile from behind the luxury silk curtains she had personally selected. Pola unmasked this shivering truth in a deathbed letter discovered in San Antonio. Adolphe Menjou is a thief in a high-end suit. He didn't just steal my fortune. He stripped away my very dignity in the black night of 1929, then stood by coolly watching the flames lick away the evidence of my life. He threw me onto the frozen pavement like a piece of refuse, only to wake up the next morning and flash that same charming smile for the media cameras. His elegance is woven from my blood and my poverty. The world still worships his shimmering suits, never knowing that every stitch and thread is soaked in the most vicious betrayal one human could ever inflict upon a colleague. 8. George Bancroft, the paramount beast and the steel hands that crushed the soul on the Dragnet set. Deep in the subterranean depths of Paramount Studios in 1928, the damp, musty odor of the basement mingled with the acrid stench of ozone from the hissing carbon arc lamps, creating a suffocating atmosphere that was truly bone-chilling. This was no ordinary cinematic setting. This was the site where George Bancroft, the actor dubbed Hollywood's Steel Giant, decided to carry out the most raw execution of honor in the history of silent film. On the screen, Bancroft was a hero whose ruggedness held a touch of elegance. But in the shadows of this basement, he was merely a predator hungering for the sensation of crushing the soul of his foreign colleague. In a torture sequence that originally required only simulated acting, the air suddenly grew dense as the cameras began to roll. Bancroft drew closer to Pola Negri, his eyes clouded and bloodshot, like a man in the throes of a bloodlust. Those coarse, massive hands, heavy as blocks of iron, unexpectedly tightened around her throat with a lethal force that far exceeded any agreement in the script. Pola struggled in vain, her eyes rolling back toward the blazing carbon lamps as her oxygen slowly depleted. Amidst the terrifying silence of the film crew, who were mesmerized by that gruesome authenticity, a dry, sickening snap rang out. It was the sound of laryngeal cartilage being crushed, the final cry for help strangled within her throat. Bancroft did not stop. He used his massive, hulking body weight to flatten her resistance, squeezing until Pola's body went limp and collapsed into the filthy machine oil on the basement floor. Instead of a shout of "cut" to save her life, Pola faced a spine-chilling reality upon waking in her dressing room. Men in dark suits bearing the heavy stench of cigarettes and cold settlement papers instead of a doctor. Paramount did not view her as a victim. They saw her shattered larynx as a mere nuisance to the reputation of their tyrant, Bancroft. The scandal fixers used her precarious immigration status as a legal noose, threatening her with immediate deportation to Poland if she dared to utter a word about Bancroft's hands. The studio chose to nail her into permanent silence through slave contracts in exchange for a cold-blooded cover-up of their million-dollar leading man. The scar on her larynx seemed to burn once more as Pola channeled her suppressed resentment into her final testament, exposing the animalistic nature of the man called an actor. George Bancroft was no actor. He was a savage beast masked as a hero. On the set of Dragnet, he used his steel hands to crush my voice and grind my future into the dust right before the eyes of those who stood by applauding. Hollywood cinched an invisible noose around my neck using Bancroft's rugged elegance and the studio's cold-blooded protection. He murdered my voice to safeguard his own tyrannical aura, leaving me to live out my final years in a humiliated silence, where every breath serves as a reminder of those blood-stained hands gripping my throat in the dark basement of Paramount. Hollywood is far more than a sanctuary of shimmering dreams. It serves as a jagged mirror reflecting the predatory shadows of social power. A realm where the final, dying testaments of Pola Negri have flayed away the skin of a stinging reality. That beneath every all-American grin or tailored tuxedo breathes a soul ground to dust without mercy, acting as mere lubricant for the grinding machinery of fame, revealing an abyss of betrayal and bias that even decades of dust have failed to choke out. If you feel a chill from these ghosts of the past finally unmasked, press like to honor the cold truth, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next dossiers of the damned. Join us as we continue to tear away the silk mask of this cinema capital, for the truth, no matter how obsidian its darkness, still deserves to be heard.